happens, but that becomes the hope that we can use social reform to also bring about civil rights in America. Like I said, the growth of liberal legislation. Roosevelt, the first president to take side of labor in a dispute. Right? He took the side of the coal miner strike. He brought about the Meat Inspection Act, right? The Pure Food and Drug Act. So all these things to better the consumer, to better society. Woodrow Wilson attacks the triple wall of privilege, right? Money with the banks, tariffs, and monopolies. The election of 1912 is one of the most interesting elections of our time. Roosevelt is no longer a Republican. What party does Roosevelt join? Well, it becomes the Bull Moose Party, but it's actually the Progressive Party. But they call it the Bull Moose because, remember, he had been in Africa after he had left the White House, and he had gotten sick there. And they were concerned that maybe he wasn't healthy for a campaign. And he said, "I'm as fit as a bull moose." Bully! The Bull Moose Party. Yes, I just did that on tape. So Roosevelt now has the Bull Moose Party, or the Progressive Party, right? One of the largest third-party campaigns in America next to the Populist Party. He's garnering a lot of support. People are starting to really rally behind Roosevelt's idea of a new nationalism. It really comes down between Woodrow Wilson's form of progressivism versus Theodore Roosevelt's form of progressivism. Taft, William Taft, he gets the nominee for the Republican Party, but people are kind of tired of Taft. Roosevelt, in October of 1912, is really starting to gain some traction until what happens? What happened to Roosevelt? Well, in, I believe it's Wisconsin, he goes to give a speech. Attempted assassination. He's shot while getting out of the car. But he's got his speech rolled up. It's a multiple-page speech. It's all rolled up tight. He's got his silver glass container there. The bullet slows before it hits his chest. He gives his speech anyways while bleeding, right? Many of you do not know this, but I was just shot. Here's my blood. And he gives nearly an hour speech anyways while the blood is pooling down the side of his shirt, right? Because he's Teddy Roosevelt. He may have won that election, but now he's got to go to the hospital, and he winds up bedridden for a few weeks. Wilson takes advantage of this. Wilson is a minority president in the popular vote. Right? He did not win the majority popular vote. It gets, if you combine Taft and Roosevelt, more people voted for them than they voted for Wilson. But he was able to sneak in and get the electoral votes. And so Wilson becomes the new president, and he brings liberalism, progressivism, and marries it to the Democratic Party. Wilson in his 14 points, right, during World War I, right, that's very progressive. We are going to change the world. We're going to make it safe for democracy, right? That's progressivism. He brings it on a world stage. Of course, he has some issues with that. The Europeans aren't going to accept all those points. His own Congress, Republicans, now don't want to accept the League of Nations. They don't want to sign the Treaty of Versailles. And it literally winds up killing Wilson, right? He winds up having a stroke. And within a few years after his presidency, the poor man will pass away. The 20s sees conservatism resurge. Harding, Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover, right? Conservatism comes back. The good old days of the Gilded Age. Laissez-faire economics, stronger towards business. Calvin Coolidge famously says, "The business of America is business. The man who builds a factory builds a temple. The man who works there worships there," right? Business is as powerful in this country as one's religion, right? That's what happens in the 20s. It's a roaring decade. Everybody seems to have money. Everybody's playing the stock market. Everything is great until it collapses, right? Also, by the way, politically, the conservatives go back to isolationism after World War I, right? You've got the Washington Naval Conference of 1921-1922, the first arms limitation agreement. They're going to reduce the number of battleships that they're making. Great Britain, Japan, the United States, Then later on you get other countries involved. The Kellogg-Briand Pact, 1928. All those countries signed swearing they'll never ever go to war again. Which, like, within a nanosecond, half of them were at war again. Right? But this idea of isolationism also is very important to the conservatives of this time period. The New Deal coalition happens. Progressivism does not go away. It comes back because of the Great Depression. FDR has a lot of power as president. He will change the idea of the modern president forever. A strong president. Right? His New Deal, his 3 R's, relief, recovery, reform. Again, very progressive liberalism is happening. Trying to get America out of the Great Depression. The 100 Days Congress, they gave FDR a blank check. They allowed him to create law. Whatever he wanted. He was just throwing things out. You know, whatever sticks, let's run with this. AAA, CCC, CWAs, PWAs, NRAs, TVAs, just the whole alphabet soup. Right? That he throws out there. That's what we call it at the time, the alphabet soup. He loved these acronyms. Right? Civilian Conservation Corps, Agricultural Adjustment Acts. But then the Supreme Court acts and begins to say that these things are unconstitutional. He tries packing the court, right? Right? Which really backfired on him in his second term. America moved towards Keynesian economics now. John Maynard Keynes, right? Demand-side economics. The idea that the government must be fully invested in the economy. Right? Creating programs, issuing mandates, spending money. This is what stimulates the economy according to Keynes. Keynes was very influential after World War II in creating the Bretton Woods Agreement. Right? All the nations will trade, open trade, and be on what kind of a standard? Gold standard for trade. Right? FDR took America off the gold standard for your paper money. We moved from receipt money to fiat. Right? That paper is money by law. You cannot turn in your paper money for gold anymore. But for trading purposes, everyone must trade in gold, and the US dollar got so strong that after a while, we only traded in US dollars. The whole world basically traded in US dollars. But we stick with this progressivism throughout the 40s. The war happens. And from the 50s until our time period, the Cold War becomes an issue. Right? The Cold War is a major issue out there, and the two parties are trying to prove that they're tough towards communism. Right? Under Truman, we get containment policy. You get brinkmanship with Eisenhower, flexible response with Kennedy, détente with Richard Nixon, and eventually Ronald Reagan spends them into the ground. Eisenhower and the Republicans move towards the middle. They become more moderate in the 1950s because of social progressivism. Eisenhower understood people like Social Security. Right? He gave us one of the biggest New Deal programs ever. The Highway Act. All those roads are built. That's a huge government program. Keynesian economics. Civil rights, as we said, African Americans moved more and more toward the Democratic Party. By the 50s, they're ready to really, hey, you have all these social programs, what about us? The moderate Republicans, the conservative Republicans try to stay out of it. Southern Democrats don't want to support it. The Dixiecrats, obviously, because of their own racist problems. We get JFK and LBJ. JFK Kennedy runs on the promise to fix civil rights. Of course, he never gets an opportunity. We'll never know exactly if he would have or what he would not have. And it's up to LBJ to bring about the Civil Rights Act. The Great Society. Again, a huge New Deal program in the smack of an economic boom. The New Deal happened at a depression. The Great Society happened when American economy was creeping up, 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 up. But what does Johnson get involved in? What hurt Johnson? Vietnam War. He's the great Shakespearean tragedy of an American president. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Could have been the best president ever. Vietnam just brings him down. Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Right? Would you like to hear that every day? That just depressed the poor man. The counterculture revolution, the new left emerges in America, pushing more and more towards a radical ideas of how society, politics, economics, all this stuff should be run. Richard Nixon comes to power, but he also has his own New Deal. He's a Republican, but progressivism is here. He gives us, the Aid to Families with Dependent Children Act. He gives us the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, right? So he also is going to give us social welfare. Right? He understands that these are the things that basically Americans like. It's not until we get to the Reagan Revolution when conservatism, right? You had that book, and that a party, not an echo, it was written in the 60s by Phyllis Schlafly, where she is saying that the Republicans are an echo of the Democratic Party. That's what happened with Eisenhower. And the new right conservatives, the extreme conservatives, and the televangelists of the 70s and 80s begin to push us more and more towards the right and more towards conservatism. And Reagan rides that wave to the White House. And he starts to shrink government. He famously says, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. Right? And we get this whole new change towards how we view government now with Ronald Reagan. Less government welfare programs, less mandates. He begins to share block money with states and allow states to have more say in how money should be spent. Right? And in today, in our time period, there's still the struggle. We still have progressivism with Barack Obama and Obamacare. Right? We still have that out there, but a strong Republican Congress fights him constantly. So conservatism versus liberalism is still with us to this day. And that brings us to an end to this lesson. Thank you for making me at least feel good. You have a great evening. We'll see some of you tomorrow. Yeah, there's the laugh track.